Just think this, if we would pass this bill, we would lift 1 million people out of poverty. We would increase the wages for 25 million people. By signing the discharge petition, by casting a vote, establishing a higher minimum wage, more money in the pockets of consumers. There's just no question. Consumer purchasing power injects demand into the economy, creates jobs, more demands for our small businesses, and again, more security for our middle class. Must be allergic.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi there bemoaning some sort of allergy she said she had there at the end of that, talking about what the Democrats believe absolutely has to happen, and that is an increase in the minimum wage. What has been titled the Fair Minimum Wage Act would see the minimum wage increase to $10.10 per hour within 2 years. Now, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid stands firm that the minimum wage increase will be below that amount, despite fellow Democrats being willing to negotiate. He delayed a vote on the legislation earlier this week, blaming Republican, quote, continued obstruction, end quote, in the Senate. The delay, which will last until senators return from a week-long break March 24th, will provide labor unions with more time to organize support for this minimum wage proposal. The proposal is opposed by business groups such as the National Retail Federation, which claims it would lead to companies cutting jobs. Joining us now on the phone, the president of the Club for Growth, my old congressional colleague from Indiana, Chris Chocola. Chris, it's good to have you along. And this delay by Harry Reid giving those union bosses chance to mobilize their workers, do you think the union members will stand as one behind this proposed $10.10 figure?
Well, it's good to be on with you, JD. I guess the question is, why would union members care about the minimum wage? There isn't very many union members that make minimum wage. They make significantly more than minimum wage. So, the question is, why is that such a big deal to them? And I think the answer is, in at least part, is because this isn't really about the minimum wage. This is about union contracts that are based on a formula that is based on the minimum wage. So if you raise the minimum wage, they automatically get increases in their wages. So it's always interesting to ask, why would somebody support something that they don't actually have a direct benefit from? And if you look, maybe they do get a direct benefit from. So it's unfortunate that the economics of this isn't really driving the discussion. It's the politics of it, and part of the politics of it is the benefit to the unions. But the worst part about it is that you're going to drive unemployment up when you increase the minimum wage. I think every economist that looks at this objectively agrees with that. But I don't think the Democrats supporting this are all that interested in the facts, just the message that they're trying to deliver.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because yesterday you had the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, testifying before the Senate Banking Committee, and she said, and I quote now, she would not argue with the CBO's estimate that this proposed raise to $10.10 in terms of minimum wage would cost 500,000 jobs. Surely this kind of admission ought to have some sort of political impact, should it not?
Well, you would think. Well, JD, you and I have been around Washington enough to know the facts don't really get in the way of people's opinions, right? So,
right.
The facts are that the media is not going to cover that. The mainstream media is not going to cover the fact that raising the minimum wage would actually mean less jobs. And if they can't avoid covering it, they'll say, yeah, but the people that have jobs will make more. I guess we don't care about those 500,000 people that would lose their jobs. And, just think about it. I just saw a commercial the other day. So, when you go to the grocery store now and they have automated checkouts, when you go to the restaurants and they have these iPads on your table and no waiter, you're going to see, people like that, great. But that's in part the result of the increased cost of doing business. We can't hire people to do things because the cost of hiring them has gone up. And so instead of making a starting wage is one way to look at the minimum wage. They make nothing. And so I don't think making nothing is better than making something. And the fact is that people that are on minimum wage don't stay on minimum wage. It's a starting wage that gets them into the workforce, that helps them learn very valuable skills and values to show up at work, show up on time, learn things that are valuable and marketable, and then they go from there and increase their standard of living because they make more. If you shut that door and never let them get started, that's one of the cruelest things you can do. Is raising the minimum wage isn't a compassionate thing to do. In many cases, it's the worst thing we can do for people trying to improve their position in life.
Chris, I'm joined in studio by Dave Patton, who is a senior editor at Newsmax magazine. He's got a couple of questions.
Chris, good to talk with you. Wanted to ask you about the impact of technology, Chris. We're talking about raising the cost of labor at a time when it's easier than ever before for employers to switch out and go to more automated systems, eliminate jobs. You can barely get somebody on the phone these days. It seems like they're even talking about automating fast food restaurants. So that would suggest that this is equally bad timing. What's your take on the impact of technology in terms of raising the cost of labor right now?
Well, I think technology is great, and the way that we ultimately raise the standard of living for everyone is to increase productivity. And so, so some of those things, technology obviously increases productivity, and it gives people the opportunity to create more value with less effort. And so we all benefit from that. But it shouldn't be the government that's driving this. It should be businesses making their own independent decisions about what they can offer their customers at what price, and is that a competitive thing? And then they make decisions on how they provide the greatest value to their customers. But the problem here is you have the government inserting itself. In many cases, it's trying to develop a political message, supporting in some cases their political friends like the unions. And they are actually hurting those they are proposing to help. And so when you shut the door on people that are entering the workforce by not giving them the opportunity to get that first job, that starting wage, so they can develop their skills, then they limit their opportunity maybe for a lifetime. And so the technology is good, but the government driving people to this technology because you make the cost of the technology less than hiring people that you would hire otherwise is probably bad for the people that proponents of raising the minimum wage say they want to help.
Well, Chris Chocola, president of the Club for Growth, we know we haven't heard the last on this issue, nor have we heard the last from you. Thank you for your time today. We look forward to talking to you in future broadcasts of America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. Thanks very much.
Thank you, J.D.
It's good to hear from Chris. We spent some time together on the Ways and Means Committee back a decade ago. Very knowledgeable guy as a businessman and as a pseudo-economist. Good choice for the Club of Growth. Now, we want to hear from you, and we love using social media. Tweet us your comments and your questions at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum, or visit us at facebook.com/Newsmax and send your email comments to connect@Newsmax TV. More to come, including Dr. David Brownstein. It's America's Forum on Newsmax TV.